What happens to a man when even his name becomes dangerous to say? Every morning, a silent dishwasher eats leftovers alone, avoids eye contact, and walks miles home like he's running from something. Keanu Reeves notices what no one else does, but when he uncovers why this man erased himself, one question remains. What truth could bring him back? Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. Before the sun rises, the cafe breathes quietly. Lights hum. Chairs remain upside down on tables, coffee pots warm without voices. In the back, a middle-aged man stands at the sink, sleeves rolled, hands red from hot water. He moves with practiced care, as if trying not to be noticed by the room itself. Plates clink softly. Steam fogs the small window above the sink. No one speaks his name. When the first workers arrive, laughter fills the front of the cafe. Orders are called out. Boots stamp the floor. The dishwasher does not look up. He keeps his eyes lowered, focused on grease and crumbs on the task that allows him to exist without being seen. When a plate comes back half-finished, he waits. When everyone is served, he eats what remains. Standing. Always standing. A few bites taken quickly, like something that could be taken away if he lingers too long. No one invites him to sit. No one asks where he lives or how long he has been here. He does not join conversations about weather or weekend plans. He listens only enough to know when to move out of the way. When someone new asks his name, the question hangs in the air for half a second too long. He answers quietly a name that does not quite belong to him. It has been rehearsed, safe, forgettable. The morning passes the same way it always does. Dishes, silence, leftovers, distance. There is a rhythm to invisibility, and he has learned it well. He wipes the counter twice, even when it is clean. He dries his hands slowly. He waits until everyone else has left the back room before removing his apron. When his shift ends, he steps outside alone and begins the long walk home, head down, shoulders slightly hunched, as if the world might recognize him if he stands too straight. This is not a man hiding from the law. This is a man hiding from memory, from a word that once meant everything to him, his own name. On this particular morning, something changes, though no one in the cafe realizes it yet. A black SUV pulls up outside, film trucks line the street, cables snake across the sidewalk. A small town that rarely sees disruption begins to buzz. Inside, the dishwasher keeps working, unaware that the quiet order he depends on is about to be disturbed. Keanu orders coffee and waits. He notices things others overlook. The man in the back, who never sits. The way he eats after everyone else. The way he flinches slightly when laughter grows too loud. Their eyes do not meet, but something registers. A presence acknowledging another presence. Years ago, this man stood in front of a classroom, his name written clearly where everyone could see it. Students listened when he spoke. His voice mattered. Today, he will wash dishes until his hands ache and leave without saying goodbye to anyone. This man once taught the future. Now, he will not even sit at a table. The cafe adjusts to the presence of strangers. The rhythm changes. Voices lower, then rise again. Someone mentions a movie being filmed nearby. Someone else jokes about Hollywood finally finding their town. The dishwasher hears all of it without reacting. He has trained himself not to be curious. Curiosity leads to memory. Memory leads to questions. Questions lead to names. He keeps his back turned as a man steps inside who does not belong to this place. Not because he is loud or demanding, but because he moves with an ease that comes from being seen everywhere he goes. Keanu Reeves waits patiently at the counter, hands resting lightly on the wood, eyes moving calmly across the room. He does not check his phone. He does not rush the server. He watches. In the back, the dishwasher senses the shift without understanding it. Plates slide into the sink. Water runs. He focuses on the small details. A crack in one mug, a stain that will not come out. He eats a piece of toast left behind on a plate, chewing slowly, standing just far enough from the doorway to avoid being seen. Sitting feels like claiming space. Claiming space once cost him everything. Someone calls out a name from the front of the cafe. Not his, never his. The sound still makes his shoulders tighten. Names are dangerous things. They follow you. They linger. They invite questions you cannot answer without reopening wounds that never fully closed. Keanu waits for his coffee and notices the man in the back again. Not the job, not the uniform. The way the man positions himself at the edge of every room. The way he pauses before speaking as if measuring the risk of being heard. The way he avoids mirrors. These are not habits learned in a kitchen. These are habits learned after loss. Outside, the street grows louder. A small crowd gathers near the film trucks. Inside, the cafe keeps going unaware that something fragile is being observed. Keanu takes his coffee and sits alone. He does not stare. He simply allows the room to exist as it is. When the dishwasher finally looks up, their eyes meet for a fraction of a second. It is not a dramatic moment. There is no recognition, only a brief pause. The dishwasher looks away first. Old instinct, old fear. Being seen has consequences. The man finishes his shift. He cleans the sink. He wipes the counter. He hangs his apron carefully as if someone else might need it later. He leaves through the back door, avoiding the front, where questions live. The walk home is long, but it is predictable. Predictability is safety. Keanu watches him go without following. Some stories cannot be rushed. Some truths retreat if chased too quickly. He sips his coffee and senses that this town is holding something it never fully buried. Once this man spoke in full sentences that commanded a room. Once people waited for him to speak. Today, he disappears down a quiet street, unnamed, unseen, carrying a past no one here knows how to say out loud. And somewhere between the sink and the door, a life that was erased is about to be noticed for the first time in years. The cafe settles again after the rush fades. Cups are stacked. Chairs scrape softly. The smell of coffee lingers in the air long after the last order is served. Outside, the town buzzes with unfamiliar excitement, but inside, the silence returns heavy and familiar. It is the kind of silence that has learned how to survive. Keanu remains seated for a moment longer than necessary. He does not check the time. He does not ask questions. His attention stays fixed on the empty space near the sink where the man stood just minutes ago. There is something unsettling about absence when it feels intentional, about a presence that leaves without leaving a trace. The dishwasher is already halfway down the road, walking the same route he has walked for years. Each step is measured. He keeps to the edges of sidewalks. He avoids storefront windows that might reflect his face back at him. Faces carry memory. Memory carries risk. He tells himself what he always tells himself. Stay quiet. Stay useful. Stay unnamed. Once long ago, his name carried respect. It was written neatly on paperwork, spoken in hallways, called out by students who believed he mattered, that life feels unreal now, like a story told about someone else. Here he is safe because he is small, because no one expects anything from him, because no one asks who he used to be. Back at the cafe, Keanu finishes his coffee and stands. He thanks the server. He nods once toward the back room where the sink is already clean, as if acknowledging a task well done by someone who will never hear the praise. He steps outside into the noise and movement of the film crew, into a world where his own name opens doors instead of closing them. Two lives move in opposite directions on the same morning. One defined by recognition, one defined by erasure. They do not touch yet, but the space between them has narrowed. The town believes it is watching a movie being made. It does not realize it is standing at the edge of a truth that was never finished. A truth buried not by a verdict, but by silence, by whispers, by the slow decision of many people to look away. The question hangs unanswered, heavier now than before. What happens to a man when his name becomes something he is afraid to say out loud? This man once stood in front of a classroom, trusted, respected, certain of who he was. Now he walks alone before sunrise and refuses to sit at a table because sitting feels like asking to be remembered. And soon, whether he is ready or not, someone has begun to notice. The next morning begins the same way, but not quite. The cafe opens before sunrise, and Keanu returns without drawing attention to himself. No entourage, no conversation, just a quiet presence at the same corner table, hands wrapped around a warm cup, eyes calm and awake. Outside, the film trucks wait. Inside, life moves at a smaller pace. The dishwasher arrives before most of the staff. He hangs his coat on the same hook. He ties his apron with careful precision. He does not greet anyone unless they greet him first. Even then, his answers are short, polite, neutral. He exists in the background, the way furniture does necessary, but unnoticed. Keanu notices immediately. The man never interrupts. When plates pile up, he adjusts without complaint. When a server drops silverware, he bends to pick it up before anyone asks. When the kitchen runs behind, he stays later without mentioning it. His voice is used only when silence would seem strange. Customers come and go. Some linger, some laugh loudly, some complain about coffee being too hot or too weak. The dishwasher reacts to none of it. His focus stays on the sink, on the steady rhythm of water and porcelain. That rhythm seems to keep something else in place, something fragile. When breakfast ends, leftovers remain on plates near the counter. The man waits until the last customer leaves. Only then does he step forward. He eats quickly standing. No chair, no table, no pause. The act is not shameful, but it is careful, like a ritual designed to avoid being seen enjoying anything. Keanu watches without staring. He notes how the man never sits even when the room is empty, how he eats from the edge of the plate as if leaving the center untouched, how he washes his own dish last, scrubbing it longer than necessary. There is a deliberate order to it, as if his own plate must be erased more completely than the others. Day after day, the pattern repeats. Keanu returns each morning. Same table, same coffee, same quiet observation. He does not greet the man directly. He does not offer tips or gestures meant to signal kindness. He understands that attention can feel like pressure. Silence, when shared respectfully, can be safer. The dishwasher avoids eye contact with customers, but not with objects. He studies stains, cracks, smudges. His attention lives where judgment does not. When someone thanks him, he nods once and moves away. Gratitude feels unfamiliar. It implies worth. Keanu begins to sense that this is not humility. It is caution. The kind learned when being noticed once led to consequences that never fully ended. The man is not shy. He is contained. As the days pass, Keanu does not grow impatient. He does not push for understanding. He allows routine to speak. Some truths only surface when they feel unthreatened. The cafe becomes a quiet stage where nothing dramatic happens, yet everything meaningful is revealed in small gestures. By the end of the week, Keanu knows without being told, this man is not hiding because he wants to disappear. He is hiding because being seen once destroyed him. And so Keanu keeps coming back not to intervene, but to witness. The routine becomes familiar enough that it almost feels permanent. Morning light filters through the front windows at the same angle each day. The smell of coffee settles into the walls. Keanu arrives early, sometimes before the first rush, sometimes just as the room fills. He always chooses the same seat, not out of habit, but out of respect for the order that already exists. The dishwasher moves through his tasks with the same measured pace. He never rushes, but he is never slow. There is intention behind every motion. When someone speaks to him, he answers only what is necessary. No opinions, no stories. No details that might invite curiosity. Curiosity leads to recognition. Recognition leads to memory. Keanu notices that the man listens carefully when others talk, even when they are not talking to him. He absorbs fragments of conversation about families, work, frustrations, small dreams. He never contributes. It is as if he has decided that his own voice no longer belongs in shared space. On one morning, a customer complains about a chipped mug. The server apologizes. The dishwasher quietly replaces it without comment. He brings back a clean mug and wipes the counter again, even though it is already spotless. His eyes never meet the customer's. The issue is resolved, and he fades back into the background as if nothing happened. Keanu watches this exchange closely. not because of what is said, but because of what is avoided. The man does not defend himself. He does not explain. He does not ask to be understood. He has learned that explanations can be twisted and understanding is never guaranteed. When the rush ends, the cafe empties in stages. Chairs scrape. Coats are pulled on. Conversations drift out the door. The dishwasher waits. He always waits. Only when the room is truly empty does he step forward to eat. Keanu notices how he positions himself near the sink, never fully turning toward the dining area. Even alone, he does not claim the room. There is a moment one morning when a chair is left pulled out slightly away from a table. It would be easy to sit. No one would see. The man hesitates. His hand rests on the back of the chair for a second longer than necessary. Then he pushes it back under the table and remains standing. The decision seems automatic, yet heavy. Keanu understands something then. This is not about comfort. It is about permission. Sitting would mean allowing himself the same space as others. That feels dangerous. Over the next few days, Keanu begins to notice smaller details. The man flinches slightly when someone raises their voice, even in laughter. He steps aside instinctively when others pass, even when there is room. He keeps his coat folded neatly, ready to leave at a moment's notice. Keanu does not interrupt this rhythm. He knows that observation, when done with patience, can be a form of care. Silence can be a way of saying, you do not have to explain yourself to me. And so he keeps watching, allowing the routine to reveal what words will not. By the end of the second week, the routine feels carved into the hours. Nothing about it announces change, yet Keanu senses that something is quietly unfolding, not in events, but in understanding. The cafe has become a place where patterns speak louder than conversation. Keanu learns the man's schedule without asking. He arrives before most staff and leaves after most customers. He never checks the clock. Time for him is measured by tasks completed, not hours passed. When his shift ends, he cleans the sink one final time, dries his hands carefully, and folds his apron as if it must be ready for the next morning, even though it will hang untouched until then. There is a calm to him that is not peaceful. It is disciplined, controlled, as if every movement is designed to prevent mistakes that no longer exist but still feel dangerous. Keanu recognizes this kind of restraint. It does not come from weakness. It comes from learning the cost of being visible. Some mornings, Keanu catches fragments of the man's reflection in metal surfaces. A blurred face in a pot, a partial image in the coffee machine. The man avoids mirrors, but reflections find him anyway. Each time he looks away quickly, as if even his own image carries accusation. Once, a server jokes that the dishwasher should take a day off. The man smiles politely and shakes his head. He does not explain why he never takes days off. Work is not just income, it is cover. As long as his hands are busy, no one asks who they belong to. Keanu feels a pull to speak, to offer something simple, but he resists it. He understands that silence has been this man's armor. Removing it too quickly would leave him exposed, so Keanu chooses patience. He chooses to let trust arrive on its own terms. On the last morning of the week, the dishwasher finishes eating and washes his plate as always. He scrubs it clean until it shines, then rinses it again. He places it carefully in the rack, ensuring it is indistinguishable from the others. No trace left behind. Keanu finishes his coffee and stands. He does not approach the sink. He does not offer a nod or a smile meant to be reassuring. He simply leaves the cafe as he always does, quietly, without signaling that anything has changed. But something has. Keanu now understands that this man is not waiting to be saved. He is waiting to be safe, waiting for a world that will not punish him for existing, waiting for the right moment to believe that being seen might not end in loss. And without speaking a word, Keanu commits himself to watching a little longer, listening a little deeper, and allowing the truth to surface when it is ready. Keanu notices it one evening as he leaves the cafe later than usual. The sun has already dipped behind the buildings. The street is quieter. Most of the crew has gone back to their hotels. As Keanu steps outside, he sees the dishwasher already halfway down the road, walking with the same steady pace he always uses. No ride waiting, no car parked nearby, just the long stretch of pavement ahead of him. The next morning, Keanu asks the barista casually how far people usually live from the cafe. She shrugs and mentions a few nearby streets. None of them are close to where the dishwasher disappears each night. Over the next few days, Keanu pays attention. The man never leaves in a hurry. He never checks the time. He simply walks, rain or shine, miles every night alone. Another detail follows, the absence of sound. Most people carry something that ties them to the world, a phone buzzing in a pocket, music playing softly, notifications lighting up screens. The dishwasher has none of it. No phone ever appears, no quick glances at messages, no calls taken out back. When others scroll through photos during breaks, he looks away, focusing on wiping down the sink again. Keanu watches him eat in silence, always alone. No pictures pulled from a wallet, no folded note tucked into a pocket. When a coworker mentions a funny video they saw online, the dishwasher smiles politely but does not respond. He is present but disconnected, as if he has stepped out of a world that expects people to leave traces behind. One morning, a new hire starts in the kitchen. Young, friendly, curious in the way people are when they have not learned caution yet. During a slow moment, the new coworker asks the dishwasher his name. It is a simple question, one asked dozens of times in every workplace. The dishwasher freezes, not dramatically, just enough to be noticed. His hand pauses mid-motion, his eyes lower. For a second, it seems as though he might not answer at all. The silence stretches. The new coworker shifts awkwardly. Then the dishwasher speaks, giving the same name he always does. Flat, rehearsed. It lands wrong like a word that does not fit the sentence. Keanu sees it from his table. The hesitation, the subtle tightening of the jaw. The way the man resumes work immediately, as if afraid the moment might linger. A name for most people is an introduction. For this man, it is something he must survive saying. Later that week, the cafe grows louder than usual. A group from the nearby school district stops in for breakfast. Among them is a teacher laughing easily, gesturing with a coffee cup, speaking about students and lesson plans. The sound carries into the back. The dishwasher hears it. He stiffens. The sponge stops moving. His shoulders rise slightly, as if bracing for impact. For a brief moment, he is no longer in the cafe. Something old and heavy crosses his face. Pain, loss, recognition. Keanu sees it clearly. The man recovers quickly, too quickly. He forces his hands to move again. He keeps his head down. But the damage is done. That reaction was not coincidence. It was memory. Keanu does not know what it means yet. He only knows that these are not random habits. They are patterns built for protection. And whatever this man is protecting himself from, it still has power over him. From that morning on, Keanu cannot stop seeing the signs. They are small, easy to miss, but once noticed, they gather weight. Each one points in the same direction, like quiet warnings placed along a road no one wants to travel. He notices how the dishwasher keeps his personal space empty. No locker decorated with photos, no bag left behind during shifts. When others place their phones on the counter during breaks, the space beside the sink remains bare. The man carries nothing that could tie him to another life. No reminders, no proof that he exists beyond this room. On colder mornings, coworkers pull out their phones to check the weather or message family. The dishwasher simply tightens his coat and keeps working. When someone jokes about how hard it must be to live without a phone, he smiles faintly and says nothing. The joke passes. The truth stays. Keanu watches him during small moments of downtime. When the cafe slows, people lean against counters, scroll through screens, talk about plans. The dishwasher stands apart, wiping surfaces that are already clean. He keeps his hands busy as if stillness might invite something unwelcome to return. There is another pattern Keanu notices. The man avoids first names whenever possible. He calls coworkers by their job titles or by brief acknowledgments. Hey, thanks. Excuse me. Names are used sparingly, like tools that can cause harm if handled carelessly. When someone addresses him directly, he responds quickly and moves on, cutting the exchange short. One afternoon, a regular customer tries to make conversation. He asks where the dishwasher is from. The question is casual friendly. The man hesitates again, just long enough to register. He answers with a vague reference to another town, then steps away before the conversation can continue. Keanu sees the customer shrug it off, but the pause lingers. The most unsettling moments come without warning. On a late morning, the cafe fills with the sound of laughter again. A group of teachers from the nearby school stops by, talking animatedly about students, grades, and meetings. Their voices carry easily. The dishwasher hears them before he sees them. His body reacts before his mind can stop it. His shoulders lock. His grip tightens around the edge of the sink. For a brief second, he looks up and something unguarded flashes across his face. Not anger, not fear. Something closer to grief, a loss that has not been allowed to heal. One of the teachers mentions a classroom incident. Nothing serious, just a story meant to amuse. The dishwasher flinches almost imperceptibly. It is enough. Keanu sees it. He feels the weight of it. The man forces himself back into motion. He lowers his head. He resumes scrubbing faster now, as if movement can erase what was just stirred. The teachers leave, unaware they have reopened something buried. Keanu sits quietly, his coffee untouched. He does not speculate. He does not jump to conclusions. But he knows this reaction is not random. It is specific, triggered, old. These are not the habits of someone who simply prefers solitude. These are the defenses of someone who learned at great cost that being recognized can destroy you. Keanu feels the unease settle deeper. The routine is no longer just routine. It is camouflage. By the end of the week, the unease has settled into something heavier. Keanu no longer sees the dishwasher as a man who prefers the background. He sees someone actively avoiding the foreground, as if stepping forward might trigger consequences that never truly ended. One evening, Keanu lingers outside the cafe after closing. He watches from across the street as the dishwasher exits through the back door. No phone comes out. No ride pulls up. The man adjusts his coat and starts walking, heading away from the lights, away from the center of town. His pace is steady, practiced. This is not a temporary solution. This is a life designed around distance. Keanu stays where he is, counting the seconds until the man disappears from view. The silence that follows feels intentional, as if the town itself has learned not to follow. Inside the cafe, the staff chats freely now that the day is over. Someone jokes about how quiet the dishwasher is. Another shrugs and says he has always been that way. The conversation moves on easily. No one wonders why. Keanu does. He thinks about the hesitation before the name, the absence of a phone, the reaction to teachers' voices, the way the man eats only when alone and leaves no trace behind. None of it explains itself, yet all of it points to the same truth. This man is not hiding from people. He is hiding from a story. Keanu finishes watching the empty street and turns back toward his car. He still does not know what happened. He does not know who the man used to be, but he knows this much with certainty. Whatever took this man's name also taught him that being seen is dangerous. And Keanu is no longer willing to ignore that lesson. Water runs over his hands until the skin tightens. Heat rises in small clouds from the sink, fogging the metal and softening the edges of the room. This is the place where his thoughts are allowed to exist as long as they stay quiet. Plates pass through his hands one by one. Each one gives him something simple to focus on. Grease, crumbs, stains that need pressure, not memory. He keeps his eyes lowered because looking up invites risk. Faces mean recognition. Recognition means questions. Questions lead to names, and names are dangerous. He has trained himself to disappear in plain sight, to stand where people rarely look, to move when others are distracted, to speak only when silence would seem suspicious. It is discipline, not fear, that keeps him invisible. Discipline learned slowly, painfully, over years of correction. Every mistake taught him what visibility costs. The sound of laughter from the front of the cafe reaches him like an echo from another life. He does not turn toward it. He has learned that joy can be misinterpreted, that warmth can be weaponized. He keeps his expression neutral, his body small, his presence forgettable. While his hands scrub, his mind drifts in fragments, never whole memories. Just pieces. White dust on dark fabric, chalk powder clinging to his fingers, the weight of a book in one hand, the sound of chairs scraping as students settle into their seats. He never lets the memory complete itself. He stops it before it reaches the moment where his name was spoken clearly and without hesitation. There was a time when his name belonged to him, when it was written neatly on a board where everyone could see it, when it meant something good, authority, trust, stability. He remembers the feeling of standing straight, without effort of speaking, without calculating consequences. That version of himself feels like someone he once knew, not someone he still is. The sponge slips in his hand. He tightens his grip and refocuses. The present is safer. The present does not ask who he was. The present only asks that the dishes be clean. He keeps careful count of what he says each day. Most days it is nothing beyond necessary responses. Yes, no, sorry. He avoids humor. Humor invites familiarity. Familiarity invites curiosity. Curiosity is where everything went wrong. Sometimes he senses eyes on him. A presence that feels different from the others. Not judging, not demanding, simply aware. It makes his shoulders tense, but he does not look up. Looking up once changed his life forever. He will not repeat that mistake. His discipline extends beyond the café. On the walk home, he chooses routes with fewer lights. He avoids places where people linger. He does not stop to rest, even when his legs ache. Stopping creates opportunity. Opportunity invites interaction. Interaction leads back to the past. In his small room, there are no photographs, no framed certificates, no evidence of another life. He has removed every reminder that could betray him if seen by the wrong eyes. The past exists only where he allows it, and he allows very little. Back at the sink, another plate comes through. He scrubs until it shines, clean, anonymous, safe. He does not know that someone has begun to notice the care in his invisibility. He does not know that silence can be heard by those willing to listen. For now, he keeps washing, keeping himself erased, believing that as long as he remains unseen, nothing can take from him again. He remembers the rules he taught himself after everything fell apart. Never correct anyone. Never defend yourself. Never explain. Explanations sound like excuses to people who have already decided what they believe. Silence, at least, cannot be twisted. At the sink, his body moves before his thoughts can wander too far. Rinse, scrub, stack, rinse again. The repetition steadies him. It keeps his mind from slipping back to places where time worked differently, places where a single moment could undo years of careful work. Sometimes, without warning, a smell or a sound pulls at him. Chalk dust carried on dry air, the squeak of a marker against a board, the low murmur of many voices waiting for instruction. His fingers remember before his mind does. They twitch slightly as if reaching for something that is no longer there. He never allows himself to smile too much. Smiles draw attention. Once his smile had been something students trusted, something parents appreciated, something administrators praised. That memory feels dangerous now, like touching a wire that might still be live. When he hears someone mention school schedules or exams in passing, he adjusts his stance, turning slightly away. Not because the words hurt, but because they remind him of how natural that world once felt. He had belonged there without effort. Belonging is the most painful thing to lose because you do not realize how fragile it is until it is gone. He wonders sometimes if anyone from that life would recognize him now. The posture is different. The confidence has been folded inward, compressed. He no longer takes up space with his voice or his presence. He has learned how to become smaller without disappearing entirely. His fear is not of punishment. That chapter ended long ago. His fear is of recognition without understanding, of someone seeing his face, remembering a headline, and deciding the story all over again without asking a single question. Innocence did not protect him before. Silence feels safer. He knows exactly how long he can let his thoughts drift before they become dangerous. Just long enough to remember chalk on his fingers, not long enough to remember the sound of his name spoken with respect. That is where the pain sharpens. From the corner of his vision, he senses movement in the café. The quiet man who sits alone each morning. The one who watches without staring. That presence unsettles him more than the noise ever does, not because it feels threatening, but because it feels attentive. Being ignored is easy. Being noticed gently is harder. He keeps his head down and focuses on the next dish. He tells himself that attention fades. People lose interest. They always do. He has survived by counting on that, by trusting that the world is too busy to look closely for long. He does not know that this particular attention is patient, that it does not demand answers, that it is content to sit with silence and let it speak on its own terms. For now, he remains the invisible man at the sink, holding himself together through discipline and routine, convinced that erasing who he was is the only way to protect what little peace he has left. In the quiet moments when the cafe hums but does not demand his attention, he thinks about how carefully he has shaped this version of himself, not out of self-hatred, but survival. He has learned that the safest man is the one no one remembers seeing. He does not allow himself anger. Anger is loud. Anger asks to be heard. Instead, he carries a steady resolve to remain unnoticed. He keeps his head lowered not because he is ashamed, but because eye contact invites connection, and connection invites history. The memories come anyway, uninvited. A classroom bathed in morning light, rows of desks, students raising their hands trusting him to guide them. His name written clearly on the board in his own handwriting. At the time, it felt permanent, solid. He had believed that truth once established could not be erased. Now he knows better. He has learned that truth can be buried without being disproven, that silence can do what accusations alone cannot. He was not taken to prison. He was taken out of the world he knew and left standing in the aftermath, expected to disappear quietly. So he did. At the sink, he finishes the last plate and sets it gently in the rack. He dries his hands and folds the towel with care. Every action is deliberate. Order is something he can still control. He senses that presence again, the quiet observer who never interrupts. It stirs something uncomfortable inside him, a question he has refused to ask himself for years. What if being invisible is no longer the only way to survive? He pushes the thought away and steps back into his routine. For now, discipline remains his shield, silence remains his shelter. And he does not yet realize that someone is listening closely enough to hear the weight of everything he is not saying. The discovery does not arrive with drama. It comes the way truth often does when it has been waiting a long time, quietly, accidentally, almost missed. It is late in the evening when Keanu remains at the cafe longer than usual. Filming has run late. The crew has gone. The town has settled into its night rhythm. Inside, only a few staff members remain cleaning up, moving slower now that no customers are watching. Keanu sits near the back, finishing a second cup of coffee. He does not announce his presence. He does not look like someone listening. He simply stays still. Behind the counter, two staff members talk while wiping down surfaces. Their voices are low, casual, the way people speak when they assume no one important is nearby. They mention the dishwasher, not by name. One of them says he has always seemed different, too quiet, too careful. The other hesitates before responding, then says, "There was a rumor from years ago, from before he came to this cafe, something about a school, a teacher, an accusation that spread fast and never really went away. The words are not precise. They do not need to be. The shape of the story is enough. An investigation that went nowhere. No charges, no official guilt, but no apology either. Just silence. And a name that people stopped saying because it was easier than admitting they might have been wrong." Keanu does not move. He does not lean closer. He does not interrupt. He lets the conversation continue as if he is not there. One of the staff members says they heard the case was dropped. Another says dropped does not mean cleared. They agree that some things stick, no matter what the paperwork says. Then they fall quiet, as if realizing they have gone too far. The subject changes. The moment passes. Keanu remains seated, absorbing what was said without judgment. He does not feel anger. He does not feel certainty. He feels confirmation. The patterns he noticed now have a shape, not a full picture, but enough to understand the weight the man carries. When the staff leaves for the night, Keanu stays behind a little longer. The dishwasher is still there, finishing up in the back, alone. The sink is quiet now, no rush, no noise to hide behind. Keanu waits until the man steps out to take a breath of air by the back door. He approaches slowly, giving space, careful not to corner him. His voice is calm, neutral, almost casual. He asks one question. "How long have you worked here?" The man pauses, not as sharply as when asked his name, but long enough to feel the effort it takes to answer. He looks at the ground. He shrugs slightly. "A while," he says. "Long enough." The answer is vague by design. It offers no anchor points, no timeline that could be followed backward. It closes the door gently without slamming it. Keanu nods. He does not press further. He thanks him for the work he does. The man responds with a polite acknowledgement and returns inside, relieved that no more was asked. As Keanu watches him walk away, the truth settles into place. This is not a past that has healed. It is a wound that has been carefully covered, still sensitive, still raw beneath the surface. And whatever happened all those years ago is not over for this man. Not really. Keanu leaves the cafe knowing one thing with certainty. The silence around this story was not chosen by accident. The walk back to his car feels slower than usual. Not because Keanu is tired, but because his mind is finally assembling the pieces it has been holding apart. Nothing he overheard was definitive. There were no names, no dates, no clear conclusions. Yet the absence of clarity speaks louder than any accusation ever could. A case dropped but never corrected. A reputation left to decay quietly. A man forced to learn how to survive in the space between innocence and suspicion. The next morning, Keanu returns to the cafe as he always does. Same hour, same table, same quiet respect for routine. Nothing in his behavior signals that he knows more than he did the day before. He understands instinctively that knowledge, when revealed too early, can feel like a threat. The dishwasher arrives and begins his work without acknowledging Keanu's presence. The sink fills, water runs, plates move through his hands in the same careful order. If anything has changed, it is only internal. His shoulders remain tense, his posture guarded. Whatever history he carries does not loosen with time. It tightens. Keanu notices how carefully the man avoids any conversation that might drift toward the past. When coworkers talk about where they grew up, he steps away. When someone mentions a former job, he finds something else to clean. His life seems to begin and end at the edge of the sink. During a lull, Keanu watches the man dry his hands and stand still for a moment, as if deciding whether to remain inside or step out for air. The pause is brief, but loaded. Keanu sees the calculation. Is it safe? Who is nearby? What might be overheard? Keanu does not approach him again. He allows the space between them to exist untouched. The question he asked the night before was not meant to extract information. It was meant to test whether the door to the past was still guarded. It is. The man eats his leftovers, standing as always. He washes his plate last as always. He leaves without speaking to anyone as always. Consistency is his shield. Change invites attention. Later that afternoon, Keanu watches him leave from a distance. The man walks the same long road away from town, his figure growing smaller with each step. There is something final in the way he does not look back, as if the cafe is not a place he belongs to, but a temporary arrangement with necessity. Keanu sits with the discomfort of knowing. He does not rush to assign blame or imagine outcomes. He understands that whatever happened was never resolved in the only way that truly matters. Public truth was never restored. A record may have closed, but a life was left open, bleeding quietly. The most telling part is not the accusation itself. It is what followed. The silence, the absence of correction, the way people learn to look away rather than admit they might have been wrong. Keanu realizes then that the man's discipline, his invisibility, his refusal to speak all stem from the same lesson. When the truth does not protect you, you learn to protect yourself from being seen at all. And Keanu knows now that simply knowing this truth comes with responsibility. That evening, Keanu does not return to the cafe, not out of avoidance, but restraint. He understands that proximity can feel invasive once understanding deepens. Sometimes the most respectful thing to do is to step back and allow space to breathe. He thinks about the way the staff spoke of the rumor, not cruelly, not maliciously, almost casually, as if the damage had been done so long ago that it no longer felt like anyone's responsibility. That is what unsettles him most. Not the accusation itself, but how easily the world learned to live with uncertainty when the cost belonged to someone else. The man's answer echoes in his mind, a while, long enough. It was not an evasion meant to deceive. It was a boundary, a line drawn carefully to protect what little stability remained. Keanu recognizes it for what it is. The past is still too dangerous to approach directly. The next morning will come, and the routine will continue. Dishes will be washed, plates will be scrubbed clean, the man will remain unnamed in the eyes of the room. Nothing outward will change, but something has already shifted. Keanu now understands that this is not a story about curiosity or coincidence. It is a story about harm that was never repaired, about a man who learned that even innocence can be punished when truth is left unfinished. He also understands that asking more questions now would not help. Not yet. The wound is still open, even if it is hidden beneath years of discipline and silence. For the first time since arriving in town, Keanu feels the weight of what it means to truly see someone, not as a mystery to solve, but as a life interrupted. And quietly, without speaking it aloud, he knows that this story cannot be left the way he found it. It happens on a morning that looks like all the others. The cafe is quiet but not empty. The rush has passed. Plates are stacked. The sink runs steadily. Keanu sits at his usual table, coffee untouched for longer than normal. He does not speak. He does not look toward the back. He simply exists in the room without expectation. That is what changes everything. The man finishes washing a rack of plates and turns off the water. For once, he does not move immediately to the next task. He dries his hands slowly, carefully, as if buying time. When he speaks, his voice is low and almost uncertain, like he is testing whether it is safe to let sound exist between them. He does not start with the accusation. He starts with the classroom. He says there was a window on the left side that let in too much light during the afternoon. He used to lower the shade halfway so students could still see the board. He talks about how some of them always sat in the same seats, how one kid in the back raised his hand for everything even when he did not know the answer. The details come out unevenly, disconnected, but precise. Keanu listens without interruption. The man pauses often, as if expecting to be stopped. When no interruption comes, he continues. He says the accusation came suddenly. One sentence passed from one person to another, a misunderstanding he thought at first, something that would be cleared up quickly. He believed that truth once spoken would settle everything. That belief did not survive the first meeting. He describes the investigation in simple terms: questions asked, notes taken, faces that stopped smiling. He says there were no charges in the end, no proof, no trial, just a conclusion that did not sound like innocence. It sounded like inconvenience. The case was dismissed, but nothing was corrected. No statement, no apology, just a quiet understanding that it would be easier if he went away. He says the silence afterward was worse than the accusation itself. Parents stopped making eye contact. Colleagues avoided his classroom. Friends grew distant, unsure of what to say. Some believed him, some did not. Most chose not to decide at all. That was enough. He talks about packing his things while the school was empty, taking down his name from the door, erasing the board for the last time, chalk dust on his fingers. He stops speaking for a long moment, there staring at the sink as if the memory is happening in front of him. Keanu remains still. The man says he did not fight back because fighting requires an audience willing to listen. He learned quickly that the truth did not protect you once doubt settled in. He did not want to become a headline. He did not want to be a case study. He wanted quiet. He wanted the noise to stop. He says he left town without saying goodbye to anyone. That's when his voice falters slightly. He swallows and steadies himself. He says he lost more than his job. He lost his place in the world. His marriage did not survive the strain. His family did not know how to defend him without risking themselves. His name became something people lowered their voices to say. He does not cry. He simply states it like someone reciting facts that no longer shock them. When he finishes, there is no plea in his expression, no request, no expectation. Keanu realizes something then that settles heavily in his chest. This confession was not offered in hope of rescue. It was offered because for the first time in years, the man felt human enough to speak. The man takes a breath that sounds practiced, as if he has learned exactly how much air he is allowed to use. He leans lightly against the counter, not for support, but for balance. Speaking has shifted something inside him, and he needs a moment to steady it. He says the investigation ended without resolution, because resolution would have required responsibility. It would have required someone to say they were wrong. No one wanted to say that. It was easier to let the story fade without correcting it, to let time blur the details until doubt became permanent. He says people often assume innocence is loud, that if someone is falsely accused, they will fight, shout, demand to be heard. He learned quickly that noise only fed suspicion. Every attempt to explain felt like another mark against him. Silence, at least, did not add new damage. He talks about the way strangers began to look at him. Not with hatred, with caution, with the kind of distance reserved for things that might be dangerous. He says that look followed him everywhere, in grocery stores, on sidewalks, even among people who said they believed him. He says belief without defense is just politeness. Keanu listens. He does not nod. He does not offer reassurance. He understands that comfort offered too early can feel like dismissal. The man does not need to be told it was wrong. He needs to be heard. The man says he changed his name because keeping it felt reckless. His real name carried too much history, too many questions, too many assumptions. A new name allowed him to work, to exist, to pass through rooms without being evaluated. He says he stopped teaching because standing in front of people required trust, and trust no longer felt safe. He took work where being quiet was valued, where background was an advantage, where no one asked about degrees or experience. He says he learned how to eat last because it avoided conversation, how to walk home because it avoided connection, how to erase himself carefully so no one would feel the need to investigate. He says he did not want compensation. He did not want revenge. He did not even want vindication. Those things felt too loud, too public. He wanted to live without fear of recognition, to be invisible without being hunted. There is a long pause after that. Keanu feels the weight of what is being said settle into the room. This is not a story about justice denied in a courtroom. It is about a life quietly rerouted by doubt, never allowed to return to its original path. The man looks at Keanu, then briefly his eyes steady but tired. He says he is not telling this story because he expects help. He is telling it because Keanu never asked him to explain himself, and that made it possible to speak. Keanu holds his gaze and remains silent. In that silence, the man understands that his words have landed, and for the first time in years, they have not disappeared into the air. When the man finishes speaking, he does not wait for a response. He straightens his apron and returns to the sink as if the conversation never happened. The water runs again. Plates slide into place. The routine reclaims him steady and familiar. Keanu does not stop him. He understands that the confession was not an opening for dialogue. It was a release, a moment where words were allowed to exist without being challenged or examined. The man says one last thing almost to himself. He says he stayed quiet because noise did not bring his life back. It only made people uncomfortable. He learned that being forgotten was safer than being remembered incorrectly. He says he still believes in teaching, not as a job, but as a way of seeing people. He believes in listening, in patience, in allowing others to arrive at truth without force. He smiles faintly at that as if surprised by the thought. Then he stops talking. Keanu sits with what he has been given. Not a request, not a plea, just the truth offered carefully without expectation. He feels the responsibility of it settle in his chest, heavy but clear. The man finishes the last dish and dries his hands. He does not look back. He leaves the room the way he always does, quietly, without asking if he has been understood. Keanu remains where he is, listening to the absence left behind. He realizes that the most devastating part of the story is not what was taken, but how completely the man learned to live without it. And for the first time since arriving in town, Keanu knows that silence alone is no longer enough. Keanu does not respond right away. The man has already returned to the sink, already wrapped himself back inside routine, and the room has resumed its ordinary sounds. Water running, cups clinking, chairs shifting. Everything looks the same as it did an hour ago, but nothing feels unchanged. Keanu sits still, allowing the moment to settle. He does not feel the urge to say the right thing. He understands that the right thing spoken too quickly often becomes the wrong thing. Sympathy can feel like performance. Promises can feel like pressure. He has learned that restraint is sometimes the most honest response. When the man finally passes by him on the way to the back, Keanu speaks quietly without emphasis. "Thank you for trusting me. That is all." There is no reassurance attached, no declaration of intent, no suggestion that something will be done. The words are not meant to lead anywhere. They are meant to acknowledge what was given. The man pauses for half a second, nods once, and continues on. No relief shows on his face. No expectation rises. The exchange ends exactly where it began, grounded and contained. Keanu finishes his coffee and leaves the cafe without looking back. Outside, the town is already shifting into motion for the day. Crew members unload equipment, conversations overlap, laughter carries down the street. This is the world Keanu is used to. A world where attention is loud, where action is visible, where problems are expected to be addressed publicly. He feels no pull toward that approach now. Anger would be easy. Righteous outrage would feel justified. He could confront people. He could demand answers. He could make noise. He knows from experience that noise attracts attention, but it rarely produces truth. It produces sides. It produces defense. It produces spectacle. This does not feel like a story that should be turned into spectacle. Keanu walks for a while instead of heading straight back to the set. He lets the cool air clear his thoughts. He thinks about the man's discipline, his silence, his careful erasure of self. None of it was weakness. It was adaptation. It was survival in a world that punished uncertainty more harshly than guilt. Keanu understands something important then. This is not about punishment or revenge. It is not about proving someone wrong loudly enough that others have to admit it. It is about restoring something that was quietly taken and never returned. That kind of work does not need witnesses. Keanu makes his decision without ceremony. There is no moment where he tells himself what he will do next. There is only clarity. A line drawn between what would feel satisfying and what would be right. He will not involve the man unless it becomes necessary. He will not raise expectations. He will not offer hope that might later feel like betrayal. Whatever happens will happen away from the cafe, away from the town's attention, away from the man's fragile sense of safety. Justice, he knows, does not require applause. Real help does not announce itself. And for the first time since hearing the confession, Keanu feels certain, not of the outcome, but of the approach. He will move carefully, quietly, with respect for the silence that has kept this man alive. What comes next will not begin with words. It will begin with work done where no one is watching. Over the next few days, nothing appears to change. Keanu keeps coming to the cafe. Same time, same table, same quiet presence. If anyone were watching closely, they might expect a shift, a look of concern, a question asked too carefully. None of that happens. Keanu understands that the smallest change in behavior can feel like exposure to someone who has learned to survive by staying unnoticed. The man at the sink continues as he always has. Plates, water, silence. If he feels lighter for having spoken, he does not show it. If anything, he is more precise, more controlled, as if making sure the moment does not repeat itself. Confessions can feel dangerous after they are released. Keanu respects that. His decision settles not in urgency, but patience. He does not make calls immediately. He does not search names or look up old stories late at night. Acting too quickly would be a way of centering himself in a story that is not his. This is not about proving he cares. It is about doing what care requires. He pays attention instead. He watches how the man reacts when a new customer asks a casual question, how his posture shifts when certain words surface, how relief appears only when the cafe empties. These details confirm what Keanu already knows. The past is not a chapter that closed. It is a presence that still dictates behavior. Keanu also listens to himself. There is no thrill in this for him, no sense of purpose born from being needed. That matters. He has learned to distrust actions driven by ego, even benevolent ones. If helping becomes a way to feel righteous, it stops being help. He reminds himself that the man did not ask to be rescued. He asked to be left in peace. Any step forward must honor that request, even if it means moving slowly, even if it means doing nothing visible for a long time. At night, Keanu sits alone and thinks through the shape of what might be possible. Not outcomes, not victories, just pathways, quiet ones, legal ones, ones that do not require the man to relive his worst moments in public, ones that do not demand forgiveness from a town that never asked for truth in the first place. He knows this will take time measured not in days but in trust, trust that whatever he begins will not make things worse, trust that silence used intentionally can still lead somewhere. When filming resumes each morning, Keanu does his job with the same focus he always has. On set, he is professional, present, unchanged. No one suspects anything. There is no reason they should. This separation matters to him. The work he is doing must remain separate from who he is in the public eye. The moment those worlds collide, the story becomes about him. That would undo everything. He thinks again of the man's words, "I wanted quiet." Keanu honors that by refusing to turn concern into noise. He waits. And in that waiting, his decision becomes more solid, less about intention and more about commitment. Whatever he does next will be done without announcement, without credit, and without expectation of gratitude. That is the only way it can be done right. By the end of the week, Keanu's resolve is quiet and complete. He has not promised anything, and that is deliberate. Promises create futures that may never arrive. He will not offer one until he knows it can be kept. He thinks about the man's life as it exists now, the narrow space he allows himself, the rules he follows to avoid being noticed. Any action that forces him into visibility too soon would be another violation, even if meant kindly. So Keanu chooses a different discipline. He chooses to prepare without revealing preparation. He chooses to gather facts without creating rumors. He chooses to move through systems that understand patience, evidence, and restraint. He reminds himself that justice is not urgency. Urgency belongs to outrage. Justice belongs to accuracy. Accuracy requires time, distance, and care. When he sees the man at the sink again, he does not search his face for reaction. He does not try to read whether trust has grown or retreated. He allows the man to remain exactly where he feels safest. Keanu understands that the most respectful thing he can do right now is nothing visible at all. He will not speak to the staff. He will not ask questions that ripple outward. He will not place the man's story into hands that might drop it. Instead, he commits to a private path forward, one that does not require belief or sympathy from anyone else. The first step happens far from the cafe. Keanu makes the call late at night alone after the town has gone quiet. There is no urgency in his voice, only clarity. He does not mention the man's current job. He does not describe the cafe. He does not share details that would narrow the story to a person too quickly. He speaks in careful outlines. A teacher, a false accusation, a case dismissed but never corrected, a reputation left unresolved. The lawyer listens without interruption. This is not a general practice attorney. This is someone who understands what it means when truth is buried instead of disproven. Someone who has spent years working with cases that ended quietly, where paperwork closed but lives did not reopen. Someone who knows that restoring a name is often harder than proving innocence. Keanu makes his expectations clear. No press, no contact with the man, no shortcuts that rely on public pressure. Everything must be done cleanly, patiently, and without drawing attention. If nothing can be done, Keanu wants to know that too. He is not asking for miracles. He is asking for honesty. The lawyer agrees to review the case. The work begins with old records, archived reports, meeting notes that were never meant to be read again. The lawyer pulls files that have not been touched in years. Dates are checked, timelines reconstructed, language examined closely, not for what it claims, but for what it avoids saying. There are gaps, interviews summarized instead of transcribed, statements referenced but not attached, conclusions reached without clear explanation. The lawyer notes these details carefully, not as proof yet, but as warning signs. Procedural shortcuts taken in the name of convenience. Decisions made to make a problem go away rather than resolve it. Meanwhile, the man at the cafe continues his routine unchanged. Each morning he arrives early. He ties his apron. He washes dishes. He eats leftovers standing. He leaves without speaking. The world he has built for himself remains intact, unaware that someone has begun lifting the floorboards beneath it. Keanu keeps his distance. He does not return to the cafe more often than usual. He does not linger longer. He understands that any shift in routine could alert the man that something is happening. That awareness could feel like danger. The lawyer reaches out to former administrators, not directly, carefully, framed as a review of old processes, not an accusation. Some respond cautiously. Others do not respond at all. Silence again proves instructive. Old testimonies are requested. Some have been lost. Others were never properly recorded. A key witness was interviewed once and never followed up with. A timeline inconsistency appears between two statements that were treated as aligned. The lawyer flags it. Not enough yet, but something. Keanu listens to these updates without reaction. He understands that progress at this stage is not measured in breakthroughs. It is measured in confirmation that the case was never handled with the care it deserved. At the cafe, the man washes another plate. He scrubs until it shines. He places it carefully in the rack indistinguishable from the rest. He does not know that somewhere else, someone is finally treating his past with the same care. And for now, that ignorance is part of the protection. The first silent action has been taken. The lawyer works slowly, deliberately, the way one does when the cost of haste could be another kind of harm. Every document is read more than once. Every phrase is weighed. Words like alleged, unsubstantiated, inconclusive appear again and again, clustered around decisions that carried permanent consequences. The language feels careful on the surface, but careless beneath it. What stands out most is not what was written, but what was missing. There is no formal statement clearing the man's name, no acknowledgement that the accusation lacked evidence. The file closes with administrative finality, not moral certainty. The problem was filed away, not resolved. The record suggests an outcome designed to protect the institution, not the individual. The lawyer begins reconstructing the timeline from scratch. Who spoke first? Who documented what? How quickly assumptions replaced questions. In one report, the sequence of events is summarized in a paragraph that glosses over several days entirely. Those missing days matter. Decisions were made there, opinions formed, damage done. A former staff member is contacted indirectly. They are cautious at first, unsure why anyone would be revisiting something so old. When pressed gently, they admit that the situation was handled poorly. Not maliciously, they insist, just quick. No one wanted attention, no one wanted escalation. Letting the man leave quietly felt like the easiest solution at the time, easiest for whom is not written anywhere. The lawyer notes that no independent review was ever conducted, No follow-up interviews after the initial wave of concern. No reassessment once emotions cooled. The case moved forward on momentum, not facts. Once doubt existed, clearing it became inconvenient. Keanu receives these updates without asking for reassurance. He understands that the truth often looks like this at first: uneven, incomplete, buried under decisions made for comfort rather than fairness. At the cafe, the man continues his days without interruption. He does not sense the shift because nothing in his environment has changed. No questions are asked, no strangers appear, no letters arrive. His past remains sealed in the same careful silence he has maintained for years. This is intentional. Keanu insists that the man not be contacted until there is something solid to offer. Hope raised too early can be cruel. The lawyer agrees. They will not reopen wounds just to confirm they still hurt. More inconsistencies emerge. A note references a conversation that is not documented anywhere else. A witness is listed but never formally interviewed. The lawyer finds an email thread suggesting pressure to resolve the situation quickly before it attracted attention beyond the district. That pressure explains a great deal. Still, nothing is conclusive. Not yet. The lawyer cautions that reopening the case could be resisted. Institutions do not like to revisit moments that reveal failure. But resistance itself can expose truth, especially when paired with documented gaps. Keanu tells the lawyer to continue. No deadlines, no demands. Just care. He understands that this work must be invisible to remain effective. The moment it becomes public, positions harden. Stories calcify. Truth becomes secondary. So, the investigation continues quietly, piece by piece, while a man who once taught students continues washing dishes, unaware that someone has begun to take his erased life seriously. The tension builds not from confrontation, but from patience. Something buried is being uncovered. Slowly, carefully, and the silence holds. Days pass, then more days. The work continues in parallel lives that never touch. In the cafe, the man remains unchanged. He arrives early. He works without complaint. He eats standing. He leaves quietly. The discipline that kept him safe still holds. If anything stirs beneath it, he does not allow it to surface. Survival has taught him not to anticipate relief. Elsewhere, the lawyer begins assembling something fragile but real. Not a story, not a defense, a record. A clean, careful account of what happened and what failed to happen. The missing interviews, the pressure to resolve quickly, the lack of formal, clearing language. Each detail alone explains nothing. Together, they suggest negligence disguised as neutrality. The lawyer warns Keanu that this kind of case rarely moves forward easily. Time is an enemy, memories fade, documents disappear. People protect institutions long after they stop protecting individuals. But the lawyer also says something important. Silence leaves fingerprints. Keanu understands that. The same way the man's silence revealed a wound, the institution's silence reveals avoidance. Truth has a way of surfacing when enough light is applied even carefully. Keanu does not allow himself optimism yet. Optimism would be premature. He keeps his focus on process, not outcome. On making sure that if the man is ever asked to step back into the past, it will be for a reason strong enough to justify the cost. At the cafe, the man finishes washing his last plate of the morning. He rinses it twice. He places it in the rack with the others. No trace of difference. No sign that his past is being handled with care somewhere else. That is exactly how Keanu wants it. For now, protection means ignorance. Safety means routine. The past must be examined without disturbing the present. The first silent action has done what it was meant to do. It has begun the work without announcing itself, and while no one in the cafe knows it yet, the ground beneath an old injustice is starting to shift. The shift comes quietly without celebration or certainty. It arrives in the form of small discrepancies that refuse to stay insignificant once they are seen together. The lawyer calls Keanu late in the evening. The tone is careful, measured. This is not a breakthrough call. It is something more dangerous, a call about details that were dismissed because they were inconvenient. The first inconsistency sits in the timeline. An event that was recorded as happening in the afternoon is referenced in another document as taking place after school hours. The difference is not dramatic on its own, a matter of minutes perhaps, but those minutes matter. According to one statement, the man was alone with a student. According to another, the hallway was still active. Students passing. Staff present. The overlap should have been questioned. It was not. The lawyer digs deeper. A message that was logged as a contemporaneous note turns out to have been written days later based on memory rather than observation. That distinction was never clarified in the record. The note carried the weight of immediacy without earning it. It shaped how later conversations were framed. Another document references a witness who was interviewed once and never again. At the time, the witness's account did not align cleanly with the emerging narrative. Rather than explore that inconsistency, the interview was treated as sufficient and quietly set aside. No follow-up questions, no clarification, just omission. The lawyer lays these details out carefully, one by one, allowing the pattern to form on its own. This is not evidence that proves heroism or villainy. It is evidence that proves process failure. Assumptions hardened before facts were finished. Keanu listens without interruption. The lawyer explains that cases like this rarely hinge on dramatic revelations. They hinge on what institutions choose not to look at closely. Once a conclusion becomes convenient, contradictory information is treated as noise rather than signal. The most telling discovery comes last. A recommendation memo suggests that resolving the situation quickly would minimize disruption and protect all parties involved. The language sounds balanced, reasonable, but nowhere does it ask whether the conclusion is accurate, only whether it is manageable. The man's name appears only once in that memo, not in a sentence about truth, in a sentence about liability. Keanu feels the weight of that settle in his chest. This is not proof of fame. It is not proof of wrongdoing by others in a dramatic sense. It is proof that the man was never given the full protection of careful examination. Doubt was allowed to stand unchallenged because challenging it required effort and courage that no one felt obligated to provide. The lawyer pauses before continuing. He says that reopening the case will reopen pain. Old wounds will be touched. People will resist. The man will be asked to revisit moments he has spent years learning how to survive without. There is no way around that. Keanu does not hesitate. He says he understands the risk. He says truth matters even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. But he is clear about one thing. The man is not to be involved yet. Not until there is enough substance to justify the cost. The lawyer agrees. They will continue building quietly, carefully. No sudden moves. At the café, the man finishes another shift. He washes his plate last. He dries it until no water remains. He leaves without speaking. He does not know that the silence that once buried him is now being examined line by line, and that what was ignored for years is beginning to speak. The deeper the lawyer looks, the clearer the pattern becomes. Not a conspiracy, not a single malicious decision. A chain of small choices made to avoid discomfort, each one narrowing the path back to truth. The lawyer explains that once doubt enters a record, it tends to spread. Every subsequent decision is shaped by the assumption that something must be wrong, even if no one can say exactly what. In this case, uncertainty was treated as evidence. Silence was treated as confirmation. One overlooked detail stands out more than the rest. A staff log places the man in a different wing of the building at the exact time he was alleged to be elsewhere. The log was signed and time-stamped. It was never reconciled with the accusation. Instead, it was filed separately, disconnected from the narrative that formed around him. Not disproving the claim outright, but weakening it enough that it should have triggered further review. It did not. The lawyer says this kind of oversight is common when institutions are under pressure. Once a conclusion feels useful, conflicting information becomes inconvenient. It is easier to move forward than to slow down and risk admitting error. Keanu asks only one question: is it enough? The lawyer answers honestly. It is enough to reopen the case, enough to demand a formal review, enough to force questions that were never asked the first time. It does not guarantee restoration. It does not promise closure, but it shifts the burden away from suspicion and back toward evidence. There is a long pause after that. The lawyer repeats the warning. If this moves forward, the man will have to face parts of his past he buried to survive. He will have to sit in rooms where people speak about him as a case again. Even with care, there will be pain. There is no way to undo that. Keanu listens, then answers quietly. He says that harm already exists. It has existed for years. Avoiding it did not protect the man. It only prolonged the damage. If truth has a cost, it should be paid by those who failed to uphold it, not by the person who lost everything because of that failure. Still, he insists on restraint. The man will not be contacted yet. Not until the path forward is clear. Not until there is something real to offer him beyond questions and uncertainty. Hope must not be extended unless it can be held. The lawyer agrees. They will prepare. They will document every inconsistency. They will build a case that does not rely on emotion or sympathy, only accuracy. At the café, another day unfolds exactly as the last. The man washes dishes. He avoids eye contact. He eats standing. He leaves quietly. Nothing in his world signals that the ground beneath his past has shifted, and that is intentional. Keanu understands that truth does not need to rush. It needs to be right. For now, the evidence everyone ignored is finally being seen, and once seen, it cannot be unseen. Keanu chooses a moment that does not feel dramatic. It is not late at night or early morning. It is not after a confession or a long silence. It is an ordinary day when the cafe is half full and the rhythm of work feels predictable. He waits until the man has finished his shift and stepped outside, standing near the back door where he sometimes pauses before starting the long walk home. Keanu does not block his path. He stands a few feet away, leaving space. His voice is calm, steady, unhurried. He tells the man that he did something, not out of anger, not out of obligation, simply because he could not unsee what he had heard. He says he asked someone to look at the old case, quietly, carefully. No names spoken aloud, no contact made, just a review of what was written and what was missing. The man stiffens immediately, not in surprise, but fear. Keanu sees it in the way his shoulders tighten, the way his eyes dart briefly toward the street as if expecting someone to be listening. The instinct is immediate and practiced. Visibility has always meant danger. Keanu continues before the man can retreat. He says there is no pressure, no demand, nothing required. He says the review uncovered inconsistencies, enough to reopen questions that were never properly asked, enough to offer a choice. Then he says the words carefully, exactly as he means them. You do not owe the world anything, but you deserve your name. The man does not respond. For a long moment, he simply stands there, staring at the ground. His hands curl into fists and then relax. He breathes in slowly, as if steadying himself against a wave that has arrived without warning. He says that he did not ask for this. Keanu nods. He agrees. He says that is why there are no expectations attached. This is not an attempt to fix his life. It is not a promise of restoration. It is an invitation, nothing more. The man's fear does not lessen. He says that staying hidden saved him, that learning how to disappear was the only way he survived when the story first broke. He says that reopening the past feels like stepping back into fire. Even if the truth is on his side, he remembers how easily truth was ignored before. He says that silence may have cost him his career, but noise could cost him everything else he has managed to rebuild, small as it is. Keanu listens without interrupting. The man speaks faster now, the words coming in fragments. He says, people think innocence makes you brave. Does not. It makes you cautious. because you know how little it protected you the first time. He says the thought of being seen again terrifies him, of sitting in rooms where his name is spoken with doubt even briefly, of having to explain himself again, of watching faces decide whether to believe him. Keanu does not argue. He does not reassure. He does not say it will be different this time. He says only that fear makes sense, that choosing truth often feels more dangerous than silence, especially when silence has kept you alive. He tells the man that he does not have to decide now, or ever. The work that has been done will not force him into anything. It will wait, or it will end. Either choice is his. The man looks up, then finally meeting Keanu's eyes. "What if I cannot go back?" he asks. Keanu answers quietly, "Then you do not go back. This is not a demand. It is a door left open, nothing more." And for the first time since he learned how to disappear, the man is faced with the most frightening possibility of all, that he might be allowed to choose visibility on his own terms. Silence stretches between them after Keanu's last words. Cars pass in the distance. The cafe door closes behind them, cutting off the warmth inside. The man rubs his hands together, not from cold, but from habit, grounding himself in something familiar. He says he spent years learning how not to be seen, how to choose jobs that asked nothing, how to keep conversations shallow, how to leave before anyone wondered where he was going. That discipline saved him when nothing else did. Giving it up feels reckless. He says the idea of walking into a courtroom again makes his chest tighten. He remembers the way rooms went quiet when he entered, the way people watched him as if he were an object under inspection. He is afraid that even with evidence, the doubt will linger, attaching itself to his name again. Keanu listens and lets the fear exist without correction. The man asks what happens if the truth comes out and nothing changes. If the record is reopened, but the world remains unwilling to admit its mistake. He says he does not know if he can survive that twice. Keanu answers slowly. He says that survival looks different now than it did before, that the man is no longer standing alone. But he is careful. He does not say protected, he says accompanied. The man exhales a long breath he seems to have been holding for years. He says he needs time. Not days, not weeks, just time that belongs to him. Keanu agrees. He tells him that the work will pause until he is ready, or stop entirely if he chooses. Nothing will move without consent. They stand there a moment longer. No handshake, no promise, just the quiet acknowledgement of choice. When the man finally turns toward the road home, his steps are slower than usual. Not hesitant, but weighted. For the first time in years, silence is no longer his only option. And that realization frightens him more than any accusation ever did. He walks forward knowing fear shares space with possibility, and neither can be ignored. The courthouse looks smaller than he remembers. Not less important, just quieter. The wide steps no longer feel ceremonial. The hallway does not echo with voices. There are no reporters outside, no cameras waiting, no crowd gathered to decide who he is before the door even opens. This time, there is only the building, the air, and the weight of walking forward. The man pauses at the entrance. For years, he avoided places like this, places where names are spoken aloud and written down permanently, places where the past does not stay buried. His body remembers before his mind catches up. His hands tremble slightly, his breathing grows shallow. Not from guilt, from memory. He steps inside anyway. The courtroom is modest, a few rows of benches, wood worn smooth by time. The atmosphere is tense but controlled. This is not a trial meant for spectacle. It is a review, a reckoning with what was missed. He takes a seat beside his lawyer. He does not look around much. He keeps his eyes forward, focused on the table in front of him. The surface is scratched, imperfect, solid. He presses his fingertips lightly against it, grounding himself. Keanu sits in the back row unnoticed. That is how he wants it. No recognition, no shifting attention. He is not here as a symbol or a savior. He is here as a witness, nothing more. He keeps his posture relaxed, his gaze neutral. If anyone notices him, they do not react. This is not his moment. The judge enters. Everyone stands, then sits. There is no rush, no dramatic opening. The lawyer begins by laying out the purpose of the hearing. Not to retry the past, but to examine whether it was handled with the care it required, whether conclusions were reached too quickly, whether doubt was allowed to replace evidence. The man listens, heart pounding. Documents are introduced. Dates are read aloud. Timelines reconstructed. The inconsistency is explained clearly without accusation. One event placed in the afternoon, another placing it after school hours. The overlap is shown. The implication is not shouted. It is allowed to settle. A logged message is discussed next, the date it was written, the time gap between the event and the record, the weight that was given to it despite that gap. The judge listens carefully, occasionally making notes, occasionally asking for clarification. The lawyer presents the staff log that was never reconciled, the timestamp, the location, the quiet contradiction it introduces. Not enough to declare innocence on its own, but enough to demand further questions that were never asked. The man's hands shake now more visibly. He presses them together, forcing them still. This is not fear of punishment. This is fear of hope. Hope that feels unfamiliar and dangerous after so many years of silence. The lawyer speaks of the witness who was interviewed once and never again, of the decision to move forward without follow-up, of the memo that prioritized resolution over accuracy. The language is careful, respectful. There is no anger in it, only clarity. The judge leans forward slightly. For the first time, the man feels something shift in the room. Not judgment, attention, real attention, the kind he was never given before. His throat tightens. He swallows hard. He does not look back. He does not look toward Keanu. He keeps his eyes forward, afraid that if he turns, the moment might break. He realizes then that the trembling in his body is not from fear alone. It is from the possibility that this time the truth might be allowed to finish speaking. The lawyer stands and begins slowly. She does not argue emotion. She walks the court through dates, logs, and omissions. She shows how a note was written days later and treated as immediate. She explains how a hallway was active when it was assumed empty. She points to a witness interviewed once and never again. Each point is presented without accusation, only sequence. The judge listens without interruption. Questions are asked carefully, not hostile, not defensive, clarifying. The record is reopened line by line. What once felt settled is now examined with patience it never received. The man sits still, hands folded, eyes forward. His breath shakes despite his effort to control it. Hope is more frightening than fear because hope risks disappointment. As the lawyer continues, the room grows quieter. Not tense with conflict, but focused. Facts replace rumor. Process replaces assumption. The past is no longer a shadow. It is a document under light. The judge asks why certain steps were skipped. The answer is simple and painful. Expediency. The court acknowledges that expediency is not justice. The man feels his chest tighten, not from guilt, but from the unfamiliar sensation of being defended by truth. He remembers the first time he sat in a similar room, how quickly everything moved, how little he was allowed to speak. Today is different. Today, no one rushes. Keanu remains in the back, unseen, exactly where he chose to be. He does not watch the man. He watches the process. This moment is not about comfort. It is about correction. He feels the weight of it and stays silent. The lawyer submits the final documents. The inconsistencies are now undeniable. The judge nods slowly and asks for a brief recess to review. Chairs scrape softly as people stand. The man remains seated, hands still shaking. He stares at the empty bench, afraid to believe that careful listening can change anything. When the judge returns, the room settles again. The judge speaks about responsibility, about the harm of unresolved doubt, about the duty of institutions to correct their failures. The man's name is spoken clearly, correctly. Without hesitation, it lands like a hand on his shoulder. He lowers his head, overwhelmed not by victory, but by the simple act of being addressed with respect. For the first time in years, the law is not something that happened to him. It is something that sees him. That recognition steadies him, and the trembling eases as the room finally feels safe to him now. The courtroom is still when the judge begins to speak. No one shifts in their seat. No paper rustles. The air feels heavy, not with anticipation, but with restraint. This is not a room waiting for drama. It is a room waiting for accuracy. The judge's voice is calm and deliberate. Each sentence is measured. There is no flourish, no emphasis meant to persuade. Only clarity. The review of the record is summarized plainly. The inconsistencies, the procedural failures, the assumptions that were allowed to harden without proper challenge. The judge states that the original accusation was never substantiated by evidence, that key discrepancies were overlooked, that the investigation failed to meet the standard required for conclusions that carry lasting harm. The language is formal, but the meaning is unmistakable. The accusation is declared unfounded. The words land without echo. No reaction follows, no gasps, no murmurs. Silence absorbs them. The judge continues. The man's professional record is to be corrected, his name cleared in the relevant registries. The findings entered formally, not as an afterthought, but as a matter of record. The judge acknowledges the time that has passed and the damage that time allowed to continue unchecked. There is no apology offered on behalf of the institution. Courts do not apologize, they correct. This correction comes years too late, but it comes with precision. The man stands motionless as the ruling unfolds. His hands tremble slightly, not from fear, but from something unfamiliar pressing against him. Hope, after years of discipline, feels destabilizing. He has trained himself not to expect this moment, not to imagine it, not to believe it could arrive without cost. He keeps his eyes forward. He does not look at the judge. He does not look at the lawyer. He does not look back. The judge finishes speaking. Silence returns deeper than before. No one claps. No one moves. The courtroom does not celebrate truth. It records it. The man's breath catches. Just once. Then again. His shoulders rise and fall unevenly as the weight he has carried for years begins to loosen without warning. The control he perfected does not fail dramatically. It slips quietly. Tears come not in sobs, but in a steady release. Relief, not joy, the kind that arrives when vigilance is no longer required for the first time in a long while. He wipes his face with the back of his hand, embarrassed by the display even now. Old habits do not vanish with verdicts. The judge asks if there is anything further. The lawyer remains seated. The man hesitates, then steps forward slightly. His voice is unsteady but clear. He does not speak to argue. He does not speak to demand. He speaks because something must be said aloud to be real. He says he does not need compensation. He does not need recognition. He does not want punishment for anyone involved. He pauses, steadying himself. He says he just needs to be called by his right name again. The words hang in the room, simple and devastating. They do not ask for more than what was taken. And in that moment, the courtroom understands that this verdict, while correct, arrived far too late. The silence after the ruling does not break right away. It settles. Heavy. Final. The kind of quiet that comes when something irreversible has happened not loudly, but completely. The man remains standing, hands resting on the edge of the table, as if his body has not yet accepted that he no longer needs to brace for impact. His breathing is shallow at first, controlled, habitual. Then it falters. Years of restraint give way all at once. His shoulders begin to shake, not with joy, but release. The kind that comes when vigilance is no longer required, when the danger you prepared for every day finally dissolves. He bows his head, pressing his lips together, trying to hold himself together out of instinct alone. It does not work. Tears fall, not in bursts, but steadily, quietly. No sound accompanies them at first, just breath. Then a single broken exhale escapes him, and with it everything he has carried alone for years. No one moves to comfort him. No one rushes forward. The room seems to understand that this moment belongs to him alone. When he finally speaks, his voice is uneven but clear. He says he does not need compensation. He does not need damages. He does not want apologies written into records that will be forgotten again. He pauses, steadying himself, then says the words that have been waiting inside him for years. He says he only needs to be called by his right name again. The words land with a weight no legal language could ever carry. The judge listens without interruption. The clerk looks down at the file, suddenly aware that what was restored today cannot be measured in documents alone. This is not a case that ends with signatures. It ends with recognition. Keanu remains in the back of the courtroom, unseen, unchanged. He does not step forward. He does not react outwardly. This moment is not his, and he understands that fully. His presence here is enough. The lawyer gathers the papers quietly. There is no celebration, no handshake meant for cameras, just a nod of acknowledgement between people who understand what it took to reach this point. The man sits down slowly, as if unsure whether he is allowed to rest yet. When he does, his hands relax for the first time. His name has been returned to him, not loudly, not triumphantly, but officially, permanently. The ruling does not give him back the years he lost. It does not repair every fracture in his life. But it does something more essential. It ends the doubt. For the first time since his life was interrupted, the story has a conclusion written in truth instead of silence. And though it came too late to save everything, it came in time to save what mattered most. His name. The days after the ruling arrive quietly, without ceremony. There are no headlines taped to doors, no crowds waiting to witness a return. Morning still comes the same way it always has. Light enters rooms slowly, coffee cools, streets fill and empty. What has changed is not the world around the man, but the way he stands within it. He wakes earlier than usual, not because he must, but because his body has not learned yet how to rest without guarding itself. For years, waking meant preparing to remain unnoticed. Now there is a new question waiting for him at the edge of each morning. Who am I allowed to be today? He sits at a small table in his room and opens a notebook he has not used in years. On the first page, he writes his real name. He pauses afterward, waiting for something to happen. A rush, fear, regret. Nothing does. The name sits there simple and unremarkable, as if it has always belonged on paper. Using it again feels unfamiliar, like a muscle that has not been exercised. He practices saying it quietly, then aloud. The sound feels heavier than he expects. Not because it is loud, but because it carries weight he has not held in a long time. He does not return to the café the next morning. There is no dramatic goodbye, no explanation offered. He leaves a note thanking the manager for the opportunity and apologizing for the short notice. It is polite, neutral, safe. The sink will be filled by someone else. The routine will continue without him. That is how most endings happen. He walks through town with a different posture now, not confident, not proud, just less compressed. He still avoids crowds. He still chooses quiet streets. Restoration does not erase habit. It loosens it slowly. He begins filling out applications, not ambitious ones, not yet. He looks for work that allows space to relearn being visible. He hesitates when a form asks for previous employment. He writes the truth carefully, attaching the court's declaration without explanation. He does not expect understanding. He hopes for fairness. The first rejection arrives quickly. A polite message, a decision to move forward with other candidates. It stings, but it does not break him. Justice did not promise ease. It promised accuracy. He keeps going. At a small library, he asks about volunteer opportunities. The woman behind the desk looks at his paperwork, nods, and thanks him for his honesty. No suspicion enters her face, no curiosity either. The neutrality surprises him. He is not being evaluated as a story. He is being evaluated as a person. He accepts a part-time position, assisting with adult literacy sessions. He introduces himself using his real name. No one flinches. No one asks questions. The room waits for him to speak, and when he does, they listen. The first time someone thanks him for helping them understand something, he feels a tightness in his chest that has nothing to do with fear. It is recognition, simple and unadorned. Keanu is not there. He does not call, he does not visit, he does not check in. That is intentional. Restoration must belong to the man alone, not to the presence of someone who helped make it possible. Justice has done what it can. It has restored dignity. It has not restored years. The man understands that. He accepts it without bitterness. Each small step forward feels earned, not gifted. And for the first time since his name became something he hid, he begins to believe that living openly might not be an act of courage, but an ordinary right. Reconnecting with the world does not happen all at once. It happens in cautious steps that feel small to anyone watching, but enormous to him. He relearns how to stand in line without scanning faces for recognition. He relearns how to answer simple questions without rehearsing every word in advance. He relearns how to sit at a table and let his hands rest instead of keeping them busy as proof of usefulness. Some doors remain closed. He expects that. Years have passed. Positions have been filled. Institutions move on quickly, even when people do not. When rejection letters arrive, they still sting, but they no longer confirm his worst fears. They are just letters now, not verdicts on his worth. One afternoon, he receives an email asking him to interview for a tutoring position. Part-time, temporary. Nothing like the life he once had. He reads the message several times before responding. When he types his name at the bottom, his fingers hesitate for a fraction of a second, then continue. Sending it feels like stepping into open air after years underground. He begins to speak more in public spaces, not loudly, not confidently yet, but honestly. He answers questions directly instead of deflecting. When people ask about gaps in his history, he does not explain everything. He does not need to. The truth exists now, whether anyone asks for it or not. He notices changes in himself that surprise him. He sleeps more deeply. He walks with less tension in his shoulders. He allows himself to imagine a future that extends beyond survival. These changes do not erase the past, but they soften its grip. Keanu remains absent from all of this. There are no follow-up conversations, no congratulations, no quiet check-ins meant to claim involvement. The help was never meant to be part of the man's new life. It was meant to make that life possible. Sometimes the man thinks about the café, about the sink, about the careful routine that once defined his days. He does not miss it, but he respects the version of himself that endured it. That version kept him alive when nothing else could. Justice did not return his lost years. It did not repair every relationship or restore every opportunity. What it returned was simpler and more profound. It returned his right to exist without apology. For the first time in a long time, he is not waiting for the world to forget him. He is learning how to be present again, slowly, imperfectly, and on his own terms. Weeks pass before Keanu returns to the cafe. Filming has wrapped. The trucks are gone. The town has slipped back into its familiar rhythm as if the disruption never happened. When Keanu pushes open the door, the bell above it sounds the same as it always did. The smell of coffee is unchanged. The tables are arranged the same way. At first glance, nothing feels different. Then he notices the sink. There is someone else standing there. Younger, less careful. The movements are efficient, but untrained in silence. Plates clatter a little louder. Water splashes without the same restraint. The rhythm is similar, but the discipline is gone. The space where the man once stood feels wider than it should. Keanu takes a seat and orders coffee. No one mentions the change. No explanation is offered. The cafe continues as if this were the most natural thing in the world. People rarely announce when someone quietly leaves their life. The new worker hums softly while washing dishes. He wipes his hands on his apron and turns around without hesitation. He eats a sandwich during a break while sitting on a stool, scrolling on his phone. No one tells him not to. No one ever did. Keanu watches the empty space beside the sink more than the person occupying it. He notices what is missing: the deliberate stillness, the care taken not to intrude, the absence of fear in small movements. The room feels lighter not because something joyful has arrived, but because something heavy has been set down and carried elsewhere. A server passes by and asks if Keanu needs anything else. Her tone is casual, familiar. She does not seem to notice what Keanu notices. He realizes then how invisible the man truly was. Even his absence goes largely unremarked. Keanu does not ask where he went. The answer would not add anything. He remembers the way the man used to wash his own plate last, scrubbing it until no trace remained. He remembers how he waited until the room was empty before eating, how he folded his apron with care as if preparing for a return he never assumed was guaranteed. That man is not here anymore. Keanu understands what that means. Leaving without goodbye is not avoidance, it is completion. The man did not owe anyone an explanation. He had spent years explaining himself to silence and doubt. This time he chose departure without justification. The cafe feels quieter even with more noise. Laughter carries differently now. The air feels less tense, less guarded. The absence is not sad. It is resolved. Keanu sips his coffee and lets the moment settle. He does not feel pride. He does not feel closure in the way stories usually demand it. What he feels is something simpler. The quiet certainty that the man no longer needs to protect himself in this place. The sink is just a sink again. No one is standing there erasing themselves. Keanu finishes his coffee and looks once more toward the back of the cafe. The empty space holds no echo, no residue of suffering, just the knowledge that someone passed through it, endured, and then moved on. That is enough. The man did not say goodbye because he did not need to. He left when staying was no longer required. Keanu sits where he always sat, hands around a warm cup, listening to the room adjust to a new rhythm. The new dishwasher works earnestly, efficient but unguarded, speaking easily with the staff. Plates move faster, laughter drifts farther back than before. Nothing is wrong yet. Something has lifted, like a weight removed without announcement. Keanu notices how the sink area feels larger. Not physically, but emotionally. The space once held a careful silence shaped by fear. Now it holds ordinary noise. That change tells its own story. Absence can be louder than presence when it marks the end of survival mode. No one mentions the man who stood there before, not because he is forgotten, but because he no longer needs explanation. People move forward when the past releases them. Keanu understands that asking questions would pull the room backward, so he drinks his coffee and lets the quiet speak. He remembers the way the man washed his own plate last, the way he avoided mirrors, the way he stood instead of sitting. Those habits belonged to a life that no longer has to exist. Leaving without goodbye was not avoidance. It was completion. Keanu finishes his coffee and stands. He does not look toward the sink again. He knows better than to search for echoes. Healing does not announce itself, and neither does departure. Outside, the town looks unchanged. The street is familiar. The cafe sign creaks softly in the breeze. Yet Keanu feels the subtle difference that comes when a burden has been set down somewhere nearby. The world does not celebrate it. It simply continues with less strain. He walks a short distance before stopping, glancing back through the window. The new dishwasher laughs at something a server says. The sound is light, uncomplicated. It belongs here. Keanu turns away and continues on. He carries no need to be acknowledged for what he set in motion. That was never the point. The point was that a man reclaimed himself and moved forward without having to perform gratitude. Back inside, the sink remains busy. Water runs, plates clink, life proceeds. The space once shaped by fear now holds routine without tension. That is how restoration often looks from the outside. Ordinary, quiet, complete. The man did not say goodbye because he did not need to. He left behind what no longer belonged to him. What remains is a room that breathes easier and a path that finally opens ahead. It is enough. No speeches follow, no explanations linger, and no debts remain between them. The cafe continues serving mornings, and the road carries a man toward work that fits his name. Keanu leaves knowing the truest endings do not close doors. They remove locks. That quiet exchange is the measure of justice, fulfilled not in triumph, but in freedom returned steady and unannounced. Nothing else is required when dignity walks forward and the past loosens its grip. Keanu notices it only because he knows where to look. The cafe is busy again, but in a softer way than before. The morning rush moves through without friction. Cups are filled, orders are called, conversations rise and fall like a familiar song. Keanu takes his usual seat, the one near the wall, the one that lets him observe without interrupting. His eyes drift almost without intention to the small table near the sink. That was where the man used to stand. Not sit, never sit, always standing, always careful, always leaving as little trace of himself as possible. The table looks the same at first glance. Same scratches on the wood, same uneven leg that wobbles slightly if pushed. But something rests on its surface now that was not there before. A folded piece of paper. It is placed deliberately, not hidden, not displayed, folded once cleanly and left exactly where the man used to eat the leftovers no one else wanted. Keanu feels a quiet tightening in his chest as he stands and walks toward it. No one else seems to notice the paper, or if they do not recognize its meaning. It looks like nothing. A receipt, a note forgotten in the rush, something easily thrown away. Keanu reaches the table and pauses. He does not pick it up immediately. He lets the moment settle. The absence around him feels full, heavy with memory. The sink hums behind him now, occupied by a new worker who moves faster, louder, unaware of the history held in this small corner. Keanu lifts the paper and unfolds it slowly. The handwriting is careful, but not stiff. Each letter shaped with intention, as if written by someone who understands the weight words can carry. There are no extra lines, no explanation. Just one sentence centered on the page. Thank you for seeing me when I was nobody. No name, no signature, no attempt to identify the writer. Keanu reads it again, slower this time. The simplicity of the message lands harder than anything that could have been said aloud. It does not thank him for justice. It does not mention courts or rulings or names restored on paper. It thanks him for something much smaller and much rarer. Being seen. Keanu lowers himself into the chair opposite the empty space where the man once stood. He does not rush the moment. He lets the sounds of the cafe continue around him. The clink of dishes, the hiss of steam, life moving forward unaware of the quiet exchange that has just taken place. He thinks about how long the man lived without being acknowledged, how many rooms he passed through without anyone truly noticing him, how carefully he trained himself to disappear because disappearing felt safer than being misjudged. The note does not ask for anything in return. It does not invite response. It closes a chapter without fanfare. Keanu folds the paper again and slips it into his pocket. Not as evidence, not as a keepsake to display, but as a reminder. Recognition does not always come with noise. Sometimes it arrives quietly in the exact place where someone once believed they did not deserve to exist at all. And sometimes that is enough to save a life. Keanu sits back down slowly, careful not to crease the paper in his hand. The cafe hums around him, but the sound feels distant, softened, as if the room itself understands. This moment is not meant to be rushed. He reads the note again. The handwriting is steady, deliberate, not hurried, not emotional, just honest. Thank you for seeing me when I was nobody. There is no explanation beneath it, no attempt to justify leaving, no update on where the man went or what comes next. The absence of detail feels intentional. The man has spent years explaining himself to silence. Now he owes no one an account of his future. Keanu thinks about how carefully the note was placed, not handed over, not left with staff, set quietly on the table where the man used to stand eating leftovers after everyone else had gone. The table was never meant to be claimed. It was borrowed space, temporary. The note feels the same way, a final use of borrowed space before moving on. He folds the paper once and slips it into his jacket, not as a souvenir but as a responsibility. Some things are not meant to be displayed or shared. They are meant to be carried privately, understood, without explanation. The cafe feels different now, not empty, not sad, simply complete. The absence does not feel like loss, it feels like resolution. the kind that arrives quietly without ceremony when something unfinished finally reaches its end. Keanu finishes his coffee and stands. He looks once more toward the sink, where a new pair of hands work steadily. Life has continued without interruption. That feels right. The man did not need his departure to be noticed. He needed it to be possible. As Keanu steps outside, the morning light has shifted. The street looks the same, but it does not feel the same. Something heavy that once lingered here has lifted, not erased, but released. He walks away without turning back. He understands now that recognition does not require public acknowledgement. It does not require praise or gratitude or applause. Sometimes it requires only one person willing to notice another without demanding explanation. The man did not thank Keanu for fixing anything. He did not thank him for justice or courage or persistence. He thanked him for seeing him, for allowing him to exist as a person again, not a rumor, not a cautionary tale, not a silence people learned to live around. Keanu knows that whatever the man builds next will not be perfect. Time has been lost, relationships cannot be rewound, but dignity has been restored, and that changes how a life moves forward. As Keanu disappears into the crowd, the cafe settles back into its rhythm. Tables fill, plates stack, coffee pours. No one mentions the man who once stood at the sink. No one needs to. Some stories do not end with names spoken aloud. Some end with a name finally reclaimed. And sometimes the quietest thanks carries the greatest weight of all. Some losses never make headlines. They do not come with sirens, or court dates, or prison doors closing. They arrive quietly through hesitation, through doubt left unanswered, through stories that fade without being corrected. A name stops being spoken. A reputation stops being defended. A person learns slowly that silence can erase just as effectively as punishment. This man did not lose his freedom. He lost his place. He lost the ease of being addressed without suspicion. He lost the comfort of introducing himself without calculating the consequences. He lost years that can never be returned, not because he was proven guilty, but because no one was willing to say clearly that he was innocent. That is how many lives are undone, not by verdicts, but by unfinished truths. Silence can be louder than punishment because it lingers. It follows people into new towns, new jobs, new versions of themselves. It teaches them to shrink to avoid, to disappear in ways that feel like survival. Over time, the world forgets the accusation, but the person never forgets the damage. Justice, when it finally arrives, does not rewind the clock. It does not restore marriages or lost careers or quiet nights spent wondering what went wrong. What it restores is something more fragile and more essential. Dignity. The ability to stand in a room without bracing for judgment. The ability to write one's own name without fear. The permission to exist fully again. That is what mattered here. Keanu leaves the town the same way he arrived, without announcement, without recognition. The film continues. Scenes are shot. Trailers will be cut. Audiences will move on to the next story. This one does not follow him into interviews or headlines. It stays where it belongs in the life of someone who needed it more. The cafe remains open. Coffee is poured. Plates are washed. A different pair of hands works the sink now. The world adjusts as it always does, but somewhere beyond that cafe, a man speaks his real name again. Not loudly, not for attention, just because he can. That is what quiet justice looks like. It does not demand applause. It does not ask to be believed. It simply corrects what should have been corrected all along. There are countless people like him, people whose lives were rerouted by doubt, rumor, or fear. People who were never convicted of anything, yet still learned how to live as if they were guilty. Their stories rarely end in courtrooms. Most end in silence. This one did not. Not because of fame, not because of power, but because someone chose to listen without demanding a performance. Someone chose restraint over outrage. Someone understood that doing the right thing does not always mean doing the loud thing. Sometimes it means doing the careful thing. And sometimes that is enough to give a person their name back. Life does not pause to honor corrections. It keeps moving, indifferent to verdicts and careful language. The town returns to its routines, and the café keeps serving coffee before sunrise. Trucks roll in and out. Scenes are filmed and wrapped. Keanu finishes his work and prepares to leave the same way he arrived, without announcement. He thinks about names and how easily they can be taken away, not erased by law, but softened by rumor until people stop saying them at all. He thinks about how silence can do what punishment cannot. It can shrink a life without leaving marks anyone feels responsible to repair. Most people believe justice arrives loudly, with statements and crowds and raised voices. They imagine that truth announces itself. But the truth he witnessed moved quietly, carried by patience, documents, and restraint. It did not demand attention. It asked for accuracy. The man did not get his years back. Time did not reverse. Classrooms remained filled with other teachers. Students grew up without knowing the one who once stood at the board. Justice restored dignity, not time. And dignity, once returned, changed everything without changing much at all. Keanu understands that leaving matters. Staying would turn the story into something else. He leaves town early, before the cafe opens, before the sink fills with plates. The road stretches ahead, ordinary and quiet, the way real endings usually are. Somewhere behind him, a man speaks his real name again. Not to an audience, not to prove anything, just to exist fully in a world that once refused him that right. That is enough. Quiet justice rarely looks heroic in the moment. It looks like waiting, like restraint, like choosing not to speak when speaking would center the wrong voice. It looks like protecting a person from hope until hope can be held without breaking. It looks like walking away from credit and letting outcomes speak for themselves. In a world trained to reward noise, this kind of justice can feel invisible, even suspicious. Yet it is often the only kind that repairs without reopening wounds. Names carry weight because they anchor memory. When a name is questioned, everything attached to it begins to wobble. Work becomes conditional. Relationships become cautious. Even self-trust erodes. Restoring a name does not erase the past, but it reorders the future. It allows a person to stand without apology and to speak without calculating danger. That change does not announce itself. It settles slowly, like breath returning after panic. What endures is not the ruling, but the permission to exist fully again. Permission to apply for work without bracing. Permission to meet new people without rehearsing a cover. Permission to remember without shame. These permissions are small, but they accumulate. Over time, they rebuild a life that was paused, not destroyed. And that rebuilding done quietly is the most faithful measure of justice. It honors the person first, the process second, and the future always. That order prevents harm from repeating when attention fades. Stories like this are everywhere. People lose their names without committing a crime. They are judged by suggestion, abandoned by uncertainty, and left to survive in the space between accusation and proof. Silence becomes a verdict no one ever votes on. If this story stayed with you, consider why. Consider how many lives are altered not by guilt, but by doubt. Consider how many people you pass each day carrying histories no one bothered to finish fairly. Have you ever known someone whose life was ruined by a lie? And what other quiet acts of justice would you like to see Keanu Reeves take on next?